Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I rank the best card designs for 1992 across all the sports. 92 is where we started to get into an embarrassment of riches. The number of really good to great card designs up at the top tier across the sports was growing pretty rapidly. And it makes it a little interesting going through this list because every single sport had a couple of cards that were really at the top end. But when you look across the entire breadth of all the sports, while some of the designs did get replicated between the different sports, there's enough variety that you get a whole different feel for all of the different cool cards of 1992, where the microcosm of looking at one sport, where you kind of get into the groove of that sport. Some card designs read a lot better when you're just looking at those cards, as opposed to when you look across the span, they now start to have a different kind of competition, and you begin to look at them slightly different, and they don't read necessarily quite as well. 1992 Score Baseball is an excellent example. If you're looking at just baseball cards, it really is one of the great card designs of the entire sport of baseball, for baseball cards. The problem is that it's still using an old card stock, which takes away a lot of the potential liveliness, and it's not an elegantly formed card, where when you're looking at baseball, you can get excited about it being a baseball card. When you compare it to other sports, it loses a lot of that luster, and a card that may not have been quite as good in baseball now can read a lot better. And that also applies to Fleer in basketball. The Fleer basketball card is truly an impressive card in basketball because you see where it's come from. You get to see it in its natural state. But again, it uses an older card stock, and it doesn't have a lot of strength to it. It's too dim of a card. So it's lacking those things which in basketball you can get into the groove of it and you can really appreciate it. When you look at the other sports, it just doesn't quite hold up. And then in baseball, I also had Leaf that I brought in, and that was the first one to just say, no, that doesn't belong here. So those three cards were all cards I considered, but I couldn't quite include them in this list because they couldn't really hold with the top. It's a lot of cards that we have here to look at them. And I'm only going to be specifying one of the multiple sport cards, even though I will be talking about the others. But we kick this off with Upper Deck for hockey, where they use different card designs across all the different sports for Upper Deck. So these all stand as independents. And for the hockey card, this really does show the difference between the design investment that was going on between the different sports. See, hockey was a very regional sport. Even at this time, it was still primarily regional. And so when basketball overtook hockey in terms of the national consciousness and the marketability across the whole span of the card market, basketball became a place of greater innovation than hockey, and hockey was kind of a backwater. It was the leftover. And so cards were rarely designed around hockey. So when you look at the 1992 Upper Deck hockey card, this is a great card. And it's almost more of a lead-in to what we would see in 1993, but it doesn't quite hold up to the other cards, some of the other cards that we would see from Upper Deck. It's really nice, but it's kind of lackluster. I mean, it's an elegantly formed card, but it doesn't have energy. It doesn't have distinct standout quality that grabs you and pulls you in. It is better than baseball, but that's not hard. And so while I really like this, I think that it's a great hockey card. I just don't think that it really has a place with these upper tier cards. And the next one to talk about is Stadium Club, specifically basketball. Now, Stadium Club was built around great images, and they kind of got the rest of the card out of the way, which is both a strength and a weakness. It's a strength if the images work well, and in basketball they do. I mean, frankly, the hockey images also work well. So both of those sports do carry really well. Basketball, I think the images are a lot stronger than with hockey. But there is no design to it. That's still the problem. And so while the images look great, you have to take the time to step up and look at the cards and really let the image work. That's the problem. You're doing the heavy lifting, the card is not. And since we're talking about card designs, I mean, these cards do look great, but you got to give them a chance. You've actually got to take the time to let the card work in its right way. And That's always a tough one for me. If I want a card to be able to make its own statement. I also do have to acknowledge that for basketball specifically, I've never liked the fact that they have the 1992 Topps cards on the back. Now, I love what they did in the other sports where they showed the rookie card. But with Topps, they had abandoned basketball for a decade. And when they came back, it's almost like an insult that they were reminding you that, yeah, they weren't making cards all these years. It's like an absentee dad showing up and reminding you of the wonderful life that he lived while he wasn't around with you. It looks stupid. And even worse when they have the Stadium Club card as the rookie card. Look, if you're not going to show the actual Fleer or Hoops or Skybox or Upper Deck card, I get that. Even Star would have worked. But the fact that they didn't show it, okay, I'm fine with that. Then why don't you do something like the Archives cards, put those on so that you have something that looks different? Because when you have a 1992 Stadium Club card with a 1992 Topps card featured on the back, it's just dumb. Not that that impacts the ranking, I just got to get it out of my system. So, at any rate, Stadium Club, the images are good, the design is kind of not there, and that's kind of the problem. And then the next one is Pro Set Power. And Pro Set Power, this is one I really want to put higher on the list. And I keep having to talk myself down off of this because I have to acknowledge that, look, the next ones we're going to be looking at are a bit stronger. See, I know how to look at this card. I grew up on 1990 Pro Set. Pro Set was my company. And when it ceased to exist, then I had to kind of find a new love. When I look at this card, to me, this is what 1990 Pro Set grew up and became. It is the ultimate example of that card. Because 1990 Pro Set was all about a great image and then a card that frames it and highlights it and enunciates it. And here in 1992, they learned the lessons from Platinum. Platinum taught them what not to do. And they learned a couple of tricks to go into 1992 and allow that picture to really pop right out. And that was the key, was instead of just focusing on a great image, like, say, Stadium Club, they highlighted the players so that when you look at the card, the player comes out strong. And some of these images just really are impressive images. And they carry beautifully because the card is built in order to enunciate the player, and yet they do it with a borderless design. It's an impressive trick that they play. I also love the logo. I think the logo is just amazing. One of the great logos. It's got a stone detailing on it with some gold foil on it. Just the way that it all comes together just looks great. And I think that they did a brilliant job with having a muted name down below that it kind of works with it and it kind of disappears in a way. All of that, the way it all comes together, the card back, I think they really nailed it. The problem that the card has is that I admit it doesn't have a distinction that makes it pop out different from everything else. And I think that's part of the reason why people overlook the set and don't necessarily really realize that it even exists. It is a very overlooked set, and I think that's a shame because it is a great, great, great card set. But I have to say, there are 5 cards that I am perfectly comfortable putting ahead on this list. And I'm starting that off with Upper Deck Basketball. Now, this is a card that has always frustrated me, and it does so because, to me, it is not a great design until I give it a chance, and then I realize it is a great design. But I got to get into the right frame of mind to really let all the details come together. Down at the bottom, it has some really cool, it has a cool team color with a color fade and some gold foil. Great, I'm sold. Except all of the detail of the band with the color fade, that looks great, but the gold foil, instead of enunciating it, it fights it. There's a little battle going on, and there's a lot of battle going on down at the bottom with nothing going on up at the top until you discover that there's a little bit of gold foil up at the top with the team name, which looks really cool. Except it doesn't work in an integrated fashion. And that's the issue that this has. And that's why it's always thrown me off. It's a bottom-heavy card. Everything's down at the bottom, and then up at the top, it feels like there's nothing up there because they don't even have the logo up there. You need to at least have some detail that pulls you in, and that text doesn't do it. And so I've always looked at this card as an underachieving card. I've never thought it was a great card until I give it a chance. And then once I get in the frame of mind, I realize it is an absolutely amazing card. And that is where I'm torn with this. I think Pro Set's better, but when I give it a chance, I realize this is better. It's kind of a struggle. At least the images do tend to be nice though, so there is that. And then as a minor step up from that, we've also got Skybox in basketball. And this is another one where it suffers a lot when it's up against this competition because it uses an old cardstock. So it's not glossy. It doesn't have anything really enunciating the colors and the textures of the card. It's kind of a blunt instrument, and yet it's a brilliant achievement of having that blunt instrument. So I like the way that it comes together. I think it reads well in probably the most distinct way of any of the cards on this list. And that's why I continue to have it up here in the top 5, because I really do think that it is in kind of a league of its own. And yet it suffers a bit when you start to look at the level of production that was going on around it. They were going to need to make a major step up, which they would do. But you can see that in not making that step up, you can see how close they were to really having a mover shaker card. Just a few little details that were added to it, and this card would be a whole nother conversation. But it's this conversation, and I do love the card. But as far as the top 3 go, we get into Pinnacle, and Pinnacle is a great example of showing the difference between different sports, the way they come across. Pinnacle to me is a football card design. It was originally created for football, and I think it usually was strongest in football. Now, I think that so there were 3 places where we saw Pinnacle in 1992. You had hockey, which was just too busy. That they need to really work with that. In baseball, they got more of a clarity to it, but the images kind of pop, but in a limited way. So the cards just look really nice. But in football, you get an energy. And that energy, that dynamic quality of the images, it really brings out the whole card. So the black border needs some energy to really enliven it. And that's where I think football has the big strength. So I think it comes through beautifully in these cards. They're gorgeous, gorgeous cards. As gorgeous as they are, I do think, though, that the 1992 Upper Deck football card is just a little bit better. And where I put it better is the fact that this card does have, it has more of a distinct look to it. Pinnacle looks great, and it definitely grabs your eye. But the Upper Deck cards, there's a liveliness in terms of the colors, the way that the design work goes into it. When you look at the other Upper Deck cards, the other Upper Deck cards are better, they're fancier. I guess that's the best way to put it. But in this case, even though it's not quite as fancy, it does all the things it needs to do better. The design elements down at the bottom are a stronger theme. You have a little bit of team color in there that gives just the right hint of what's going on. The stone detailing is a really well-balanced affair. It's well-structured. The logo looks great. I love the way that the team logo looks on it. But all of that works with the image, which is oversaturated. I still think the images look fake. I still don't mind. And then they have the Upper Deck logo up there, which is the counterpoint that brings it all together and makes it cohesive. So where this really has its strength is you get the feeling of the whole image that the player is in, and yet they make sure in most cases that the image stands out strong. The player is the part of the image that comes through, and you feel the image of the player specifically, and then the details down below. And those work together to make this card a celebration of the player with more energy than you saw in Pinnacle. But while I love these 2 cards a lot, I gotta give it to Fleer, where in Ultra, they nailed it. And football, we're not going to mention it. It doesn't belong on this list. Hockey, again, kind of busy. Not really. They really didn't quite get hockey to work right. Basketball, they were getting there. The basketball cards, the images are strong. The way that everything works together, I think, works really well. But to me, this is the baseball set. And it started out as a baseball set, but they learned from football and they did a better job with the images. They got the images to really come out. And I think that it is hands down the best card front. One thing I'll say though is that the card back for basketball, I got to give it to them. In basketball, they really nailed the card back in a way that I think is better. I don't know that I would say that it is overall universally better, but to me, I like the clarity of how they designed it. And it was a lead-in to the kind of the mess that they would make in 1993. But in 1992, that card back, between the two, these are all-time great card backs. But the card front, I think, really does come down to baseball, because I think that the design of the elements down at the very bottom, I think they work better in baseball, but the images just work better. I think that's where they really, really nailed it. So to me, that is the top of the order for 1992 in terms of card designs. I think they look great. I'm really interested, because I'm next going to be moving on to looking at draft pick rookies specifically, and frankly, I haven't even started to pull them out, so I don't even know what I'm going to be looking at as they move away from the celebrations of 90 and 91 and get into more of a pattern of making cards. I am envisioning Fleer right now, Fleer for football, and I'm not excited about that, so I'm going to try to get that out of my mind and just let the imagination run wild for what's going to come next week as I embark on that. Other than that, if you haven't subscribed already, definitely do so. Check out my other videos, and thank you very much for watching.